Hello, I'm glad you've made it to here. If you remember, in the last video I talked about the way that we want to give up our power or want to take other people's, and how in effect that is actually not possible. What I want to do this time is what I promised, and give you a way of dealing with those power issues when you're in a situation. And first of all, I'll ask you to think of a situation in which you felt that you're not comfortable. And it doesn't really matter in which way you're not comfortable. It could be any one of these four. So it could be when you're feeling helpless and as if the other person has your power, or it could be when you're feeling really superior and you are sharing with somebody else how very superior you are. It could be when you're feeling that the other person is really not very important and you are. Or it could be in this helpless sort of situation where you and the other person are equally without resource. If you can't immediately think of anything to do or to use, then I suggest that you pause your video now and think of a situation where you have been uncomfortable, so that when you restart the video you can work on that situation. If you remember, when I was talking last time, I gave you the normal, the best, the healthy way to be is to be equal. Now these circles actually grew out of the visualised balls that I'm going to tell you about, and I think that a healthy sized ball might actually be compared, for instance, with a 10-pin bowling ball. It would be about this size. What I want you to do is to imagine yourself and the other person in the situation that you've thought up, and perceive each of you as having a power ball. Now if you're uncomfortable, one of those power balls is going to be bigger than the other, or it should be. I'll deal with the situation afterwards if they're both the same size and you're still uncomfortable, and what I suggest you do in that case is to again pause the video and think of a different situation. Once you've looked at this situation, you're going to finish up with a small ball and a large ball. Doesn't matter whose it is, or you might finish up with two large ones or two small ones. So I'm going to go round. In this case, if you've got a small ball for yourself and the other person's got a big one, maybe the size of a beach ball or something like that, then you are doing your best to get that person to make your decisions for you, or at least to blame them for the decisions that you make. So what you need to do in this case is to pull back your own power from this ball and put it into your own ball, which may be the size of a pea, and make sure that both are exactly the same size, and probably that's about the size of a bowling ball. If you're in this corner and your ball is much bigger than the other person's, then what you have to do is to give that other person's power back. That means you have to push into this ball, or this pea, or whatever size it is, all the power that you have in your ball that actually belongs in that one. In this case, you will be pushing the power that you have taken from outside back into whatever institution or person or organisation you took it from. So both for you and for the person whose power you were also perceiving as having been taken from somewhere else. In this case, you have to look at the organisation or person outside to whom you have thrown your own power, and possibly the other person's, or maybe it's another set of people whom you've given this other person's power to, and you need to take those 2 lots of power back. Actually, the first time I really thought about this one was when I had somebody in an evening class who perceived his and his wife's balls as being the same size, and I assumed that was okay, and then I looked at him and I thought, and he looks as if he really feels awful. So I said, but how are you feeling? And he said, well, helpless. And I said, well, what are you doing with your power? And he said, he thought about it and he said, I'm giving it to my parents. So I said, okay, what are you doing with your wife's power? And he said, I'm giving it to her parents. The reality is they've both got their own power and they can both make their own decisions. Okay, so in this case, pull the power back from the parents or the police or whatever. You may need to pause the video at this point. If you do, pause it, come back when you've sorted out the power, and we'll talk on. Now that you've put your power right, you need to look at the situation again that you thought of in the first place and see how it seems to have changed. The reality is it won't have changed, it's only the way you perceive it that it's changed. However, it'll look different. What I hope you'll find, and what everyone so far who's done this exercise that I know of has found, is that the situation now looks a lot easier to deal with, and that there are a lot more options that seem to be available. So what should happen is that you should feel better able to make good decisions about how to deal with this situation. I said that I would tell you about the situation where you had equal-sized balls but were still feeling uncomfortable. I first thought about this when I had a senior manager, managing director of one of the companies in one of the blue chip groups in England, tell me that when he felt uncomfortable in the presence of the chairman of the board, then what he would do was to imagine the chairman of the board on the loo or making love. Now it seemed to me that that was really an invasion of this other person's privacy, and that it was in fact a very unhealthy process. So I thought about it and I decided that what was happening in fact was that rather than, I'll call him David having his power in his ball, and so what's its name, having his ball full of his own power, what David had done was to leave his, having given his power, or tried to anyway, to the chairman. He had then, instead of taking his power back, he had taken the power of the chairman, so that although he had equal balls, his power was in the other person's ball, and what he had was the other person's power. Now this is not in the least bit healthy, and it's not something you want to do. So if you should have found a situation like this, what you need to do is go back to the situation now and swap the powers around so that you have your power and the other person has his or hers. What I hope you found that interesting and useful, and that you were able to do the exercise as I suggested. What I'd really appreciate you doing is commenting on this video in YouTube, and also, assuming that you found it useful, and I'm assuming that you did, I'd ask you to send to your friends the link to the first of these 3 videos that you watched, so that they can watch them and eventually come here, and then you and your friends will find it much easier to cope. I do have to tell you that this is only a sticking plaster thing. it will not be a permanent fix. And if you want a permanent fix, then let me know, and I will send you the information about my personal development program, which gives you an absolutely permanent, very quick and simple fix for all of these difficult situations. See you soon.